Hello, welcome to Popmosis Film, the show that asks the question, what happened to... Oh, I didn't even say it right. I had this all planned out in my head, and I said it wrong right off the... I wrote it down and everything, but I didn't look at my notes. What happened to... No. What became of...
What happened to our fourth host? Just kidding.
I had the rhythm planned out. I even said it aloud earlier. What became of Death Becomes Her? Couldn't say it right. I'm pulling a Paul over here.
Yeah, totally. You're doing. Yeah, we probably should cut this part out.
I never.
It's
Paul
it's
loves
very,
to try to.
There's very much
the best stuff out.
Out of character right here. No one for you is out of character. It's like you're supposed to be a stable one. You know, like.
Which tells you the horror that the show, the level of terror that everyone listening should reside in, that I am the stable one.
Yeah, you are the stable one.
Bad news for the world.
Exactly.
So I am Josiah, and I am a writer with a master's in writing from USC, which kind of relates. We'll get back to that. And I am joined by my co-hosts, Tyler and Paul. So say hi, guys.
Hello.
Hi.
Good evening. Good evening.
Hi, Phyllis. How are you? I enjoyed this movie. I think it's great.
I was good a second ago. Now I'm...
That was intense.
It didn't land. It didn't land.
That was some Paul ASMR. So.
All right.
Paul Summer.
I hope we can edit this out. This is like not very good.
No.
Stop
Keeping
asking
it all
for
in.
things to be edited out. It stays. So let's just jump right into this movie. It is Death Becomes Her, released July 31st, 1992, directed by Robert Zemeckis. And the reason I mentioned the USC thing today is he is a fellow USC alum. Written by Martin Donovan, who wrote a lot of old school TV. The guy's like an old school TV writer if you look up his credits. And David Koepp, who is most famous for Jurassic Park and later Spider-Man, who's a big-time guy. Produced by Steve Starkey, who is Zemeckis' producer, kind of going back to the Future and Roger Rabbit. I think he was like an associate producer, but he's still, if you look at the credits, the guy still works together. And Robert Zemeckis is the other producer, starring Meryl Streep, Bruce Willis, Goldie Hawn, and of course Isabella Rossellini in there. At a budget of $55 million, it opened at only 12 million, and made only 58 million in the U.S., but it did make 149 worldwide. So, and as we go, we'll talk about, I have a list of VFX people that I want to get to, because it's obviously very important, and that's, for me, that's the significance of this film. I have actually never seen it before watching it for this episode, and that surprised me that I hadn't, because it's a really important film special effects wise. I first was aware of it because it's really funny too. Paul and Tyler both know this. I've been digitizing a lot of old VHS stuff and kind of digging through content that I recorded off of television. There was one videotape that I had that said special effects show that I recorded right around this time. And that show, unfortunately, I recorded over it with something else, so it's something completely different was on there. It wasn't a special effects show, but I remember distinctly that special effects show. It talked about these special effects in here, both the practical and the digital effects, which were very much groundbreaking. And so it's funny that I was so excited I knew what it was, and that I remember this. It's it's not the type of movie you associate with visual effects, but.
Can I say something
Please.
real quick that Paul and I talked about was that, like, so when I came up with this, so this was actually like my pick for us to do, because it was getting off of HBO Max at the end of the month, and so I watched this for the first time 2 weeks ago, and it blew my mind, and I was like, hey guys, I think we should do Death Becomes Her, because it's groundbreaking. It's a gorgeous movie. Like we were talking about the sound, the effects and everything, and then. What happens, like, not even 3 days ago, but if you're watching this, you probably know who the Corridor Crew are. They do a breakdown of this movie, and it's the weirdest thing, because I haven't heard of this movie since, like, the early 2000s. This is, like, the last time I even heard anybody say anything about it, saw anything promotional for it. Like, nobody cared about this movie for the longest time. And so I watched this movie on HBO Max on a whim, and then now Corridor Crew do a whole breakdown of the special effects 3 days ago, and it's the weirdest like coincidence of like everything. So it was just crazy, and I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, the timing was really
that is
insane.
pretty weird. I don't know, it happens sometimes. But hey, it's funny. Out of the three of us, I actually grew up with Death Becomes Her. my parents had this on VHS, and I would watch it every once in a while, and I loved it. It's like I just grew up with this movie, so I would watch it all the time, and like I didn't understand why it was good, but I loved it. I love the tone of it, how it's like this dark sense of humor, and like I love how like when Meryl Streep or Goldie Hawn they die and like they kind of are flopping around or like trying to hold their head up. It's like all this macabre shit that happens in the movie that like I was probably like 12 or this came out 92, right? So I was about 11 or 12 at the time when I saw it, and it just like perfectly my kind of sensibilities. So yeah, I grew up with Death Becomes Her, and when like Tyler mentioned like, hey, let's watch Death Becomes Her, I was like, finally, a good idea from Tyler. Like I'm like, it's like, oh, good job. Like I'm proud of you, Tyler.
I did it. I did it, guys.
You did it for once. For once. So yeah, no, I have to give you credit. It was a good movie. I really enjoyed it.
No, it was a great choice. It's funny though, like for me, it's kind of similar to Tyler, but even longer. I hadn't thought about this movie since I first heard about it in the early 90s when it was a big deal for the special effects. And I am so glad that I finally got to see it and experience it and really enjoy it. And even I was watching it, and Judy, she's like, oh, I've seen this movie a bunch of times. And like that never happens with these things. Judy has never seen something more than me, let alone several times. So that shocked me in and of itself. So I'm glad to finally experience this movie.
One thing that just blew my mind of this movie, just right out the bat, I knew that Bruce Willis did some comedy, and of course he's shown up in some Wes Anderson movies. I never in 1,000 years thought that 90s Bruce Willis would do this film. Like, and it was refreshing. I thought he was like, I thought he was great in this movie. And I just, huge mind, just like my mind blown moment of just, man.
I thought he was good, but I also thought he was the weak link. Because I feel like it was Bruce Willis kind of sort of trying to play Woody Allen or something. So it didn't work as well as I would have wanted. But he's still good and he's funny.
No,
but
I love that.
It's very much a weird choice for him to even do the movie, like you said, because he was, pre Die Hard, and we talked about Die Hard at length on a previous episode. He was a comedy television actor, and then by the time this movie comes out, it's a veer back to that comedy direction where he is now a movie action star. By 92, he is probably now one of the biggest stars in the world. And for Bruce Willis, it was an interesting choice. Kind of, he was basically one of the biggest action stars at the time. He was Arnold, and he was up there with those guys. And here you have him going back to comedy, veering back in that direction, which is very much a surprising choice. So,
of course,
and I didn't hate him, but I think I'm calling him the weak link, but it's because Goldie Hawn and Meryl Streep are so very good in this. So very good.
Agreed 100%. Absolutely.
I think of it this way, though. I think as an ensemble, they're very strong, and you kind of need that straight man to make the ensemble between Meryl Streep and Goldie Hawn work. So I kind of see them as an ensemble. I think they work really well together. I don't really see like Bruce Willis as a weak link more so than more of a straight man, kind of like.
But he's not. I think the reason he's not a good straight man to me, or at least a less than ideal straight man, is because he's too cool. He's Bruce Willis.
Well, the funny thing is,
exudes it.
Like this is the first. Like I saw Moonlighting first when I was a kid, and then I saw this, and then I didn't see Die Hard until like maybe 5 years later. So my first thought of Bruce Willis is comedy. So I saw him as a comedy guy, and that's why like I was used to him as a comedy guy before he was an action star, and so I was the opposite. I was like, whoa, he's a great action star. That's weird. He was like such a milquetoast guy in Death Becomes Her. Like this is so bizarre. I was like in the reverse, like how I saw Akira before Blade Runner, like that kind of thing. So, yeah, I'm just wired differently, I guess. I don't know, but
you're like a different timeline kind of thing. Where like
absolutely.
Different decisions.
Like what's that thing with the alternate timeline? It's like the
You're in a timeline where they didn't replace the Infinity Stones. Cap didn't go back and put it back.
Yeah. There's a term for it. It's like the something syndrome or something.
Evil Paul. I don't.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know the mirror universe. I don't know, but there's a term. Anyway. I love this movie. I love the acting choices of it. Like when I was a kid, I didn't really understand what was going on in the movie. Like I understand the story, but I understand like the dark humor of it. And like I love at the very beginning when he's like, everybody's like watching Madeline, do her show, and everybody's like, "Oh God, this is awful," and like bored and sleeping, and then you see the camera pans and you see Bruce Willis and he's like totally captivated, and Goldie Hawn's looking at him like, "Oh God, he's gonna lose that Madeline test." He's like totally captivated by her, and they go in the dressing room and he's like in love, like he's just like, "Whoa, look at her."
And I'll say my criticism of Bruce Willis aside, that moment was his best moment in the film. Right at the beginning, it sets up the dynamic, and he did that so well. When he is cheering and everyone's just filing out, that was so good. He was great in that moment. And that moment, at least, Bruce Willis was definitely the best choice for the part.
It was weird seeing Bruce Willis hyper for once. That was just really strange. I was like, shouldn't you be saving the president's daughter or something? Like, what's going on here?
And I think the funny thing is, like, it sets up the first really good joke, and it's like, oh, Helen, don't worry. I'm not interested in Madeline. Jump cut, married, walking through the...
Dun, 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 dun.
Exactly.
Like, really, this film is, in a lot of ways, we'll talk more about the effects and the revolution, the significance of that, but in terms of filmmaking, it's really like a masterclass. If you look at it in terms of direction, cinematography, editing, and for me, obviously, as a writer, it's so well written. The jokes are so smoothly written that I haven't read the script, but it feels like on the page it was just I'm assuming it's all there. You don't improvise with a movie that then has this kind of practical and special visual effects tacked onto it. It was just so good. Everything was so clever. Everything was so well set up and so well structured. I was watching it and I was so impressed that the real core, the action of the movie, if you really think about what the real plot is, doesn't start until 30-40 minutes in, when they then plot to kill her and all that. That's when the real action kicks in. But the first 30-40 minutes of that, it's setting up character, and everything in it works. So even though the plot really gets kicked in at that point, it's nothing in there is missed, nothing in there is extra. There's not too much fat on there. And again, now I'm like, Bruce Willis is the weak link, and here I'm gonna praise him again. There's that moment in the limousine when they're driving up and they're just quiet, and she's like, and it's just silence, and then she's like, "Can you not breathe?" And that's all they say. And I don't know how long that scene is, but it's so good. It's the combination of setting up a great scene, shooting it perfectly, so you just linger there for the perfect amount of time, and then one unbelievably great actress, and one really good actor, that just everything was just, that moment nailed it for the whole movie, that set everything up in terms of their relationship so simply.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like out of the three, I mean, Goldie Hawn is a comedic like god. Like, she's unbelievable. I love her in every single comedy movie that she was in, and she just always nails them. I mean, she's a comedy god. And
Meryl
just real
Streep quick to jump on that with
Oh.
Goldie Hawn before you go on the Meryl Streep. I just really watching this back, poor Goldie Hawn doesn't get the love for movies she did in the 80s and early 90s that just, her comedy, like, is fantastic. So many movies. I can't think of the one where she's the Girl Scout troop lady, and the one Overboard with
I love
Kurt
Overboard.
Russell. Like, her comedy, top notch. And I feel like
Absolutely.
it doesn't get enough. We need to do some episodes on those films, but Goldie Hawn, definitely an all-time great comedic actress. So now you can talk about Meryl Streep.
Oh, you're fine. I would love to talk about Overboard. And but like, Meryl Streep was so fantastic in this film, where like I didn't really know that she did too much in comedy, but of course it was back then when she was getting started. I mean, of course she was, and I mean, she also did a lot of drama stuff like back then. I mean, she did.
I think this is really, I would say for her, it's kind of this is the Bruce Willis equivalent of, oh, I can do comedy too. She at this point probably won like 57 Oscars, going back to like at least The Deer Hunter.
That's it.
The first thing I remember her in is The Deer Hunter, and then everything, some really fantastic work in the 80s, and I'm sure she won a handful of Oscars along the way. And I'm pretty sure
I mean, she just knows how to act. Like, she just give her anything. I mean, she could be Batman. She would be the best Batman, I think, if they gave her that. But like, I agree with you. Like, I love Bruce Willis. I think he's great in this movie. But compared to these two
Yeah.
titans, like, yeah, he, you know,
I mean,
yeah.
here's an example of Meryl Streep's acting is like when she's at the clinic with Sapolsky or whatever it is. She's like talking to the receptionist, and she's like, we only can do this treatment once every 6 months. And she's like, oh, well, it's about time. And it's like, no, you were just here like 2 weeks ago. What are you talking about? And so they're having a back and forth, and she like approaches her like a kind of like a junkie almost, like she's like addicted to youth and very vain. And she's like bargaining, and like it's an interesting scene how like she goes through a range of emotions, trying to use her charm. Like she's like first like trying to sympathize with her or like trying to draw sympathy, and then but she goes through a range of emotions. It's like she's bargaining. She's like, hey, I can pay you whatever you want. Like, let me have the treatment. And then she like the blocking is really good because like the receptionist, she like moves aside, and you see the guy that recommends the Fountain of Youth people or whatever, Isabella Rossellini's people. And what I really like is how the receptionist, she had like this fake French accent the whole time, and as soon as her boss is like, get the fuck out of here, she like has like a Brooklyn accent or something. Like this whole movie has like a really strong sense of
like everybody's
duality.
so fake.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just a really strong sense of duality, like the public face versus what the reality, like.
Yes.
So, and I think that was really interesting, and they carry that whole theme through the whole movie. It's very thematically rich, and so I really enjoyed that, and just that acting choice is like amazing though, to act like, to apply like that sort of like junkie mentality or like that sort of to this is like just a great acting choice. Like, yeah, like Josiah said, watching this is like a masterclass on many levels, like filmmaking, acting, even like for animation. There's so many acting choices that I like jotting down notes like, oh, I should do this, I should do that, because it's so great. It's like it's awesome. So.
And Meryl Streep in this in particular, it was very much the whole movie. It's a throwback to like a Betty Davis type of thing, and all like it's a very has that vibe. The Sunset Boulevard, strong vibe of Sunset Boulevard was a great parallel to this movie. This is almost it's almost like you could see this existing in the same universe as that movie. So
almost
it's
like
just
Japan
really cool to
piece,
see a modern take. That's now 30 years old, but a modern take on it.
I actually would equate, and no, I if I would have put this like in some universe, I would put this in the universe of Beetlejuice, like, and I think like that what I was talking about before, where like before we recorded, one thing I said, like when I was watching this movie, I was baffled. I was like, this is awesome. Like I was like, who is this Tim Burton wannabe? And then when the credit came up on the end, because I missed the beginning credits, I guess, or I wasn't paying attention, and it says directed by Robert Zemeckis. I was like, oh, I was completely off. I was like, oh man, he's the guy that Tim Burton wants to be, and that was a weird thing. And so like with the fantasy and the weirdness of it, and honestly, like the music sounded like, I know it wasn't Danny Elfman, right?
I don't believe so.
It sounded like it. Like everything about this movie, it's like it felt so much like a Tim Burton movie, which I guess would have been a really big deal at the time after Batman Returns coming out the same year, Beetlejuice, and a few other things. So like I don't know, it's weird.
Well, the tone of it definitely did. The music was very reminiscent of, I can't think of the movie, but again, it's like there's a lot of referential things that are throwbacks to these older sort of screwball comedies or these dark comedies that are from a bygone era, and this was definitely not the era for that movie, as you can see by sort of what it did at the box office.
It's almost like a 30s like soap opera, really, the way the acting choices are. They kind of go to caricature so that the dark elements can kind of be smoothed out and more accepted, like, because you have spouses trying to murder each other and plan their demise and all this like really dark material, but they balance it so well because these actors go to caricature, and like you have Goldie Hawn, she's eating Cheetos, and like there's all these cats all over the place, and she's like watching as like Goldie Hawn or Meryl Streep dies in the video, but it's like very very exaggerated, but they do that just like kind of balance things out, and I think it's like, I don't know, this movie's amazing, and I'm kind of gushing.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you know what? It's this is so sad I didn't know this because I love both films. I was gonna say, like, a lot of it also reminds me so much of 'Romancing the Stone, and of
Robert
course I'll look it up, and
Zemeckis.
that's also a Robert Zemeckis film.
Oh, yeah.
So
Robert Zemeckis
so,
is really. It's funny because one thing I mentioned the USC connection. I just looked up. He graduated from SC in like '72 or something like that, and I never equated him as being as closely connected to the Spielberg. Even though Spielberg didn't go to SC, he's essentially one of the SC guys because he hung out with John Milius and all these other guys like George Lucas, obviously. But those guys were just a few years earlier in the late '60s. But if you look at Zemeckis' career, it is really very Spielbergian in terms of the types of movies he does and the range of movies he does. And then the thing about Zemeckis, though, is he is always pushing special effects boundaries in movies you might not think about it. Roger Rabbit, for example, I loved as a kid, and I didn't think of it as a groundbreaking special effects thing. I just thought, well, cartoons and people, great. And that was revolutionary for what they were able to achieve. And then this movie, and obviously later on, even with like Beowulf and Polar Express, not necessarily my favorite. Polar Express is not my favorite Christmas movie, but pushing the boundaries of the motion capture and all that stuff that then Spielberg would later use in Tintin. So you see, it's interesting to look at his career, even though in my mind he was much younger than those guys. He was not, but he was just kind of behind them, making a lot of, and like if you go back to his first movie, Used Cars, the comedy, the stuff that he's done. Back to the Future, obviously, which we haven't even mentioned. Of course. The effects,
I would go back. I would go back and like to mention Romancing the Stone. I just think that's one of the. I love that film.
No, sorry. Great, yeah.
Like Robert Zemeckis very much has like a Spielbergian kind of style, but
no,
he kind of adds his own
but,
flavor to it.
But what Tyler said is very, very, very true. That I didn't really connect it until you mentioned it, but I saw it all over this film. It's a Zemeckis' most Burton-esque film for sure. There are so many things, just like the mansion that Isabella Rossellini's in, the way it's sort of dressed and set. And then there's some later on in the film when Bruce Willis is like trying to escape and he's up in the top, the gothic nature of that place. There's these great matte painting shots there that are sort of that's the
like
end of matte
and stuff too.
It's very that gothic style, but something that Tim Burton would absolutely have in every one of his movies 57 times. So I totally see it and I felt it, and now that you said it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's it for sure.
It's
like
crazy,
it's almost like a castle in Edward Scissorhands with a doctor. It's a price. It's kind of like that a little bit, and stylistically, like Tim Burton is one.
No, if it's in any universe, it's in the universe of Edward Scissorhands. I like that.
I always forget about that film. I'm not gonna lie. No, absolutely. I think with like this, I think why. I can't believe this movie is not as of a big of a deal as it is. I can't believe people are still not like honestly like kind of talking about it. There's a lot of other movies from the '90s that people talk about that were very groundbreaking, and I cannot believe that I have not heard or even thought about this film. You know, I remember saying the one scene where Meryl Streep snaps her neck back, when she gets hit with a shovel, and when I was a kid. And that was the only thing, and that scarred my memory. That scared the shit out of me. I was like, I guess I was like 5 years old, so because I was born '88, came out '92. It was on HBO or it was on TV, so it was like I was like 5 or 6, and scared the ever-loving crap out of me, and that's all I knew about this. But that's all I remember. I didn't remember it was Meryl Streep. I was surprised it was Meryl Streep because she's all in the in the promo. It's Goldie Hawn with the candles, and with the hole, and then Meryl Streep is turned around and her head is like, I just didn't put two and two together. Or also, it just doesn't look like Meryl Streep. I mean, they did so much makeup. She looked amazing in this film. Like, she looked like Meryl Streep, but also, if you're not looking for Meryl Streep, you're not going to notice it's Meryl Streep. Maybe that's just me.
It's like the Meryl Streep Where's Waldo, but it's like Goldie Hawn. No, Meryl Streep. No.
I was going to equate her maybe just like Brian Cox, where like like they always look different in every single movie. Like her and Julia, and then Iron Lady, and then like Mamma Mia, and then like Into the Woods. She's like, is this the same person?
I think that just speaks though to Meryl Streep though in particular. Like, this is very much, at least at that time in particular, this is very different than what she had done before it. So it definitely is. And then because Meryl Streep is Meryl Streep, when you watch Meryl Streep, you forget it's Meryl Streep. She is so transformative as a performer that you forget that it's her. Like, Goldie Hawn is a great comedy actress, but you're aware it's Goldie Hawn. Bruce Willis, the same thing. Their personalities are they're so big that is almost what takes over. Not in a bad way at all. Yeah. But with Meryl Streep, she is such an actor that just becomes whatever she's playing. She's like Daniel Day-Lewis and her are probably the best two parallels. They become the character that they are performing.
No, I agree. There are some actors like a lot of the actors like Goldie Hawn, like they're just like, listen, you're gonna do this great, you're gonna do the job perfectly, but we just want you to be Goldie Hawn because that's what sells tickets. Where Meryl Streep, Daniel Day-Lewis, Timothy Spall, like people like that who they just cast as like, listen, I don't want them to know really who you are, just become something. And like that's what they do, you know, like and Joaquin Phoenix, like that's why they're called character actors, where I think the other ones are just like they're actors that do an amazing job. I'm not trying to knock them at all. I feel like it's two different kind of styles.
And the thing about Meryl Streep is like she could be character actor and a leading actor. You know, like she could do both. Mm-hmm. She has such a wide range. She could do any genre, and no matter what film, no matter what role is, like she puts 100% into it, and it's like a tour de force. Like she never does the same. Yeah. Acting choices, like she always does something different. She always challenges herself, and it's like, another movie that I really love around this time is Defending Her Life. It's one of those movies that kind of like was lost to time and not many people know about. That one. And I love Defending Your Life so much, and I hope we cover that one as well because Meryl Streep and Albert Brooks are amazing.
Oh, Albert Brooks.
I just. You know, one thing that I really like, there's a particular line that I really liked, how Bruce Willis, they called him in, and he was being beeped, and he goes in the office like, hey man, we need you. We need to fix this situation here. And they're like, oh, you know, he died, while he was having sex with his, this guy died like when he was having sex with his like maid, and she was like 18 and he's like 60 or something. And they go,
I like that that's the detail. I like that that's the part that you go into great detail.
No, because you see the guy's face and it's like twisted, like in, like he's like really excited, and they say to him like, hey, you can't give him any character, you can't give him any character depth. People need to recognize him, and that's such a good throw line through like the whole movie that like, everybody's kind of like dead inside, like Bruce Willis before he doesn't die, but he's like kind of dead inside and kind of going through the motions. Mm-hmm. And Meryl Streep is kind of like sucking the life out of him. And like you can even see like when they cut 7 years later, you see Bruce Willis and he's like all drunk and like just like laying on the floor. And then his side of the bed's not even made.
Yeah, sleeping on the floor.
I'm sorry, his side of the bed was made, while Meryl Streep's side of the bed is like all cluttered and she has all that stuff on her face. And like she's like, oh, like she had her vanity sleep or something. She's like so like into herself, and you just kind of see the juxtaposition between the both of them. And also
in the point where she didn't notice that he didn't sleep there, he had to ask like the maid or whatever that he got up early, and it's like, no, he didn't sleep here, but she didn't notice that fact.
Yeah,
like, she's so into herself she didn't realize that.
Absolutely. And it says so much about the character, and just like that scene, that 5-minute scene, you get so much about their characterization and the state of the marriage. And, like a couple minutes ago, you saw him all gush over her like, oh my God, Madeline. Like, he was so excited. And so there's like so much going on with this movie. And I love talking about it.
No, I know. I'm so sorry. The way you're describing like how fast the beginning of this movie is, I'm imagining. Could you imagine if they just did all of it like in the style of Up with like a piano, and it's just like all the beginning of like I'm not gonna love her, and then like wedding bells, and then like just going through. Sorry, it was in my head, and it is a terrible idea, but also would be a hilarious YouTube video.
It's like reverse up, so it's like down. It's like it totally is. It's like that.
But oh man, one thing that shocked me in this movie was not only the looks and how they do those effects, because holy crap. I really love the fact that this kind of made this whole dark, demented little gothic comedy. I said it before when Josiah was saying, and like I was like, there's a tone of this film that I love very much that we don't get to see very often. Like, I mean, we equated it a lot to Tim Burton movies, but it didn't. Still, like, you can definitely tell that it wasn't a Tim Burton movie because it does have its own tone. And I actually think I like this movie more than any Tim Burton film. In all honesty, like, I really love this movie. And I was so glad to rewatch it today. But I don't know. It has this consistent, amazing tone that will like go off the rails for a little bit, but still feel comfortable, and then like just kind of go all over the place. For a lot of Tim Burton films, and I would say even some Robert Zemeckis movies, it's just kind of consistent. Like I would say, *Romancing the Stone* is just kind of like this same movie the whole time. It doesn't really do anything. Like, it has of course a climax, but it all feels very familiar to what you're watching, and like not like every scene kind of feels like it's going like back to the same thing. I don't know. I think
the fact that this is this is a comedy too is the more of the through line, whereas Tim Burton, it's there's sometimes comedy in it, but it's usually more just a drama with his style. Even if it's not a heavy drama or anything, it's still usually a dramatic film with Tim Burton's style, or maybe an action film as in Batman. But this is very much a comedy, and then it's very dark. And visually, and there's certain things that feel Tim Burton-y, but it's very much clearly its own thing. I like, to me, if I look at Robert Zemeckis' body of work, the film I would most equate it with is Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and it's very much, you look at that film, you have this bizarre cartoon extreme violence that's going on in that movie, and this movie takes that same idea and puts it makes it look very realistic. It's still super cartoony and absurd, but it's then very real. The way that her neck is twisted, the way the hole in Goldie Hawn's stomach is, those things. It's just the evolution of that, but a very real kind of looking version of that. So for me, it felt like very much Roger Rabbit, because Roger Rabbit's really a dark comedy if you really think about it. So those two movies for me are the most connected. Maybe I keep saying, what universe is it in? This is the universe of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, I guess.
Well, and
all of them are connected.
I think the reason why the supernatural elements work so much, like the body dysmorph, like the neck thing, and all that, what works really well is because you have 30-40 minutes where it's so grounded in reality. Like, you get to know these characters, and you're willing to accept when it kind of whatever happens to them, and so and all this like that. I think it's like 40 minutes in is when Meryl Streep meets Lisa, or Isabella Rossellini, and she gets a potion, and you see the demonstration on her hand that her hand like gets the H spots away, and she writes her a check, and then you see she looks in the mirror and you see like her boobs go up and her butt goes up, and she's like, oh, I'm a girl again, and that weird guy is like it's just like a weird, very quirky thing.
There's a moment before that made the reality of the supernatural totally work for me. It's a very strange moment that sold me on this film in that regard. She comes in and she's in the middle of the hall, and she doesn't know where to go, and then the elevator comes up and the doors open and the two dogs get off and they just walk down the hallway. It's those big Doberman Pinscher dogs just go down the hallway. And that moment, I'm like, okay, this is just this. It's our world, but it's off. So therefore, I buy it.
It's a good little intro. You're just like, did those dogs program the elevator? Did they like what? How did this happen? So okay, yeah. No, that's
so absurd.
This movie's so good. This movie is so brilliant.
And I like how he didn't even notice what happened with her. Like, he's so kind of removed. He's like, oh, did you change your hair? Like, but she obviously looks younger and everything. And oh man, I love the jokes in this movie. I think the jokes, like when Helen and Ernest, they're plotting how to kill Madeline. There's like these like long sweeping shots where the camera pushes in and out, and they like have this elaborate plan of how to kill Madeline with the rice, whatever the I don't know what it is, but they have this whole sweeping plan, and they all talk back and forth, and they have it all set up. And basically, what happens is like they get into argument, and Meryl Streep is like teething on the stairs, and he just like pushes her with his finger, and she breaks her neck. But I love that though. It's like all this build up, like, hey, this is how it's gonna be planned out. is how we're gonna kill Madeline, and then oh, this is what happens. Like it's just a simple push of the finger and she gets killed.
Well, I like how she's like also at like a 45-degree angle.
Yeah,
like, just
she's
hanging,
teetering.
Yeah, for like way
8
too
seconds.
long.
Yeah, it's very cartoony.
She would either
like,
totally got her balance or fell at
Yeah.
that point, but you're there in that moment and you buy it because the movie sets it up so well.
And I love it. The first thing that you see her neck break, and then Bruce
so
Willis
good.
like he runs over the phone and is like, "Oh my God, she's dead." And Helen doesn't even care that she's dead. She's like, "Hey, you didn't follow the plan that I
Yeah.
told you. Like, what's going? You didn't call the cops. Like, it's not like there's like so dispassionate." And I love how in the back you kind of see her like get up, and it's just like the staging and the cinematography. So
Yeah,
amazing.
that sequence you mentioned, like the planning sequences, and then the initial murder, and then the shoot, like all the stuff that goes on there, the way everything is set up, because it has to be perfectly set up because of the visual effects involved, which at that time were really, really challenging to do. What they achieved was really impressive. Because I was watching it, and I didn't get the chance to rewatch the movie, but I rewatched that part just to kind of look at it again. And there's points where it's like a little bit floaty and things, but I'm like telling myself, this is 1992. This is where, the Terminator 2 effect, probably the year before with the T-1000, that was a huge, huge step. And then this was like the next big step. So I want to talk quickly about the VFX people, because this is a time where they really deserve credit. So the VFX supervisor was Ken Ralston, who goes back to Star Wars and then would later do like Spider-Man and become, significant. The makeup was by Dick Smith, who is more famous for like practical effects in The Godfather and Amadeus and things like that. So he look at his credits. He's done every big dramatic movie, but those are kind of the famous ones. And then there's a credit in here, special body effects designed and created by, and that's pretty impressive that what they did was enough that they got credit specifically for what they did.
Yeah, it's a whole new role.
Yeah, Tom Woodruff Jr. and Alec Gillis. So those two guys. And there's more people involved in the effects because it did win an Oscar for best visual effects. Ken Ralston won.
I would have been pissed if it didn't.
Yeah, along with Doug Chang, Douglas Smythe, and Tom Woodruff Jr. So the combination of practical effects and digital effects, which is really the way films are made now, what you see. And if you look, this is, in terms of visual effects, it's really a precursor for what Peter Jackson would do in Lord of the Rings, and combining practical effects and camera techniques and things with really impressive digital effects technology. This is really one of the first movies to do it, particularly the first movie it's just a comedy, no matter what. To have it had a $55 million budget, and I'm sure a huge part of that budget is the salaries of your leads in this case, and then the visual effects budget in that, because I'm sure it cost a boatload to do those effects at that time, the computer effects in particular.
To connect this episode and what you're talking about with Alec Gillis to a past episode, Alec Gillis, who got the credit for doing the body stuff, is also the person who he's credited for Goro in the Mortal Kombat movie.
Oh wow! Didn't even realize
It's
that.
all connected.
Yeah, I just saw him on his.
My single favorite thing about that movie by a mile.
Oh,
That's so crazy. I'm sorry, Paul. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, it's interesting because the skin shaders used on Meryl Streep's like neck and the bones, it's actually was used for the skin in like the Velociraptors, the T-Rex and stuff in Jurassic Park. So this is all like a stepping stone to Jurassic Park.
That would be 93. So you see 91, 92, 93. It's kind of funny, like you said, that's the stepping stone, but you don't often think of, or it's maybe forgotten by people in general, that this is a huge stepping stone in that evolution of CG combined with practical effects that came later, as my Bluetooth earpiece is falling out of my ear.
And what I love about it is like the acting is so good that it really, like the special effects really enhance the acting choices. Meryl Streep's neck is all the way the other way, and she's like walking down the stairs and, trying to get the phone, and like, it's like you totally sell the special effects because of the way, like, Meryl Streep's her body mannerisms, the way she's moving is very awkward, and she's like, her body's facing this way, but her neck is the other way. And also, I love the shotgun scene because you see her Goldie Hawn being pulled all the way across like into that pool.
Yeah, that was a hilarious moment.
Yeah, that's amazing.
There was maybe 2 or 3 moments that I laughed out loud, and that was one of them.
And then like when she gets up, like they're putting the tarp over and they're gonna like bury the body in Death Valley. You see her get up, and you see her face like right in front of the camera, and she's like spitting out water, and you see like both of Bruce Willis and Meryl Streep framed inside that hole in her body.
Yeah.
And like just like everything is staged so perfectly and so well, and I even the scene after. So Meryl Streep's doing this thing with a pen. She's like playing with it. And she's like, "What's going on here? Why is she alive?" And then she recognizes, and so she goes like, "Oh, hey, you took the potion." And then there's a reversal, and Goldline says, "Well, you took the potion. Look at the pin." And she's like, "Oh, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't even need it." Like it's just such a good exchange between the two of them, but with the visual effects. So it's all like it's all cohesive and it works so well together. It's not like distracting or anything. Like the VFX like enhances the story and makes the character drama like that much more robust.
I think because not only is this a great film and so well written, like what Josiah said, I agree. Like, I mean, the bickering, the fighting, every single line in this movie, I think is so well done. And not only is it so well written, but it's also so amazingly acted especially by those two. Really do think that this is one of those movies I actually can see myself rewatching like pretty frequently. Like I would say maybe every 4 or 5 years. Like just going back and watching it, and it looks unbelievable. All the effects, and again, I want to give them. I really love their videos. I want to give them some credit, but I would definitely check out the Corridor Crew breakdown where they talk about how they do some of these scenes, including the neck back, and also the big hole, and with Goldie Hawn coming out of the out of that little fountain. So. Anyway, yeah.
And just like elements like that, adding that water in makes that much more complicated. All these things, that's complicated now, let alone at that time. That just the great thing about the movie though is the visual effects serve the story. They're impressive, but they serve the story, and that's what's great. And what kind of jumping back a little bit to what Tyler was talking about when he mentioned the writing, one of the things that for me really stands out for this movie is every line feels useful and not wasted and not there just to be there. Everything it's funny, and it also like serves the purpose of the story. It's really an impressive. I like to do this a lot when I'm impressed by watching the film, then read the actual screenplay and try to find ideally a shooting script version or something that you can dig into and see the rhythms of it there. It's its own beast, but I feel there's not a wasted line in this movie.
Yeah,
agreed.
And what I love, I think it works so well as a comedy as well. And the thing what always upsets me about comedies nowadays is you're just like, oh hey, look at this, it's funny, right? Whoa! But the thing about this movie is like,
I like that movie. That's a good movie.
Whoa!
Yeah. Comedy.
But like the thing about this one, I really whoa. I should just do that.
Wacky Paul.
No!
I'm wacky.
I'm wacky. I don't know. But so I like the doctor scene so much because, like, she takes her to the doctor. She's obviously dead. He checks her temperature, and she's like, "Oh, you're below 80. What?" And you just see like the decline of the doctor. How he's so confused. Like, she doesn't have a heartbeat. So he throws a stethoscope in the trash, gets a bigger one, still doesn't have a heartbeat, and he's like, I'm gonna need a second opinion. So he goes over and like Madeline faints, and so Bruce is like, oh my god, I need to get the doctor. So he runs out and he can't find a doctor, and he eventually sees the one like hospital room, and all the doctors are working on the doctor that was seeing Meryl Streep, and they went into cardiac arrest, and then in the meantime, while that happened, somebody took Meryl Streep and put her in the morgue because she's like dead. She's clinically dead. So you have like all this setup, all this elaborate setup, like where's the doctor, all this, and you have the payoff where you see like the doctor dying of cardiac arrest, and then you see Meryl Streep like opening up. They open up in the body bag, and it's weird. It's like how much, even though they hate each other so much, it's like Bruce Willis is consoling her, and it's like, it's okay, we'll figure this out. I know you're dead, but we'll figure this out. and this is a miracle, and like the lightning flashes in the aviary or whatever on the top. It's like everything's like perfectly staged, set up, payoff, and that's what I love about this movie. It's like everything's set, like even the when Madeline and Helen are trying to get him to drink that drink the scotch laced with that the roofies or whatever it is, and because they wanted to like take the potion too, and that's set up from previously when they did that. They set up that whole plan of how to kill Madeline, and so that this is what they're doing. And when you see him like spill a lot of it, and it's like, oh my god, you've seen the plan like fail, and then he like gets hit with a vase, and he's like, oh yeah, Madeline, what? Like nothing, like he's just used to that kind of emotional abuse, and then he almost falls down the stairs, and then they grab him, and I don't know, it's just like so great. It's just like just a fun movie and really dark, and I love it.
Actually, while you were talking about the hospital scene, you mentioned this before, but I actually want to change on what you had said. You said that this reminded you of a lot of 30s dramas or just 30 films. I actually am now thinking from like the events and how fast everything kind of goes in the hospital, and actually really kind of throughout the entire film, it's very Marx Brothers-y, where like everything's just going by really fast and it's like really, really ridiculous and really over the top. Like obviously, like somebody is in the morgue hearing her.
It's that screwball comedy genre kind of thing. So and the Marx Brothers, I think, fall into that. Just
and so but it has a very like soap opera feel to it as well. Like how everybody's very dramatic and they hate each other, and they're like it's so escalated. But also, it's in a way, it's kind of like a precursor to like Arrested Development and a lot of the other TV comedies where they do the jump cut. The jump cut to like a plan and then it fails. Like it's. Yeah. So this movie is like it's like a forgotten gem, but it's like so influential in like it inspired like the visual effects inspired
in dark comedy,
Park, as far as comedies, it's amazing. And one movie in particular that I was thinking like, what movie does this inspire? It totally inspires Forrest Gump, which came out in '94, because these characters are chronicling their whole life, like the whole interaction between the three of them, and how like Bruce Willis is being pulled apart by both of them, as he's married to one, then married to another. But you see the whole life from when they're like in their late 20s all the way till after death. And so it's like you're chronicling the whole life of all these three people. And it's interesting how like the disdain and hatred of Helen and Madeline, like that's what they thrive off of. And Bruce Willis is like the pawn that they play against each other, and in the meantime, like they suck the life out of him based on the interactions they have with Bruce Willis. But yeah,
so Goldie Hawn is Lieutenant Dan.
Yeah, I'm so confused. But yeah,
well, I think I'll say this too. Like, there's definitely a parallel because Zemeckis obviously did Forrest Gump, and the effects that he used here definitely were then. The bar was even raised with that, specifically with Lieutenant Dan and with the JFK. Historical, inserting him into the historical scenes with Forrest. Those things, it pushed things for sure in that regard.
1,000%.
By like compositing the face onto, and changing the lips and everything, that was like, what they kind of did here, but in different.
Because I think structurally they're very different movies. Because this movie, even though it does chronicle a fairly long period of time, it's like it's here briefly in the past, and then it's the present is 1990.
The whole point of the movie is for them to be eternally young. So for them to not do a long span of time, that would be a really weird movie.
Yeah, and then
I want to live forever. And the movie takes place in 3 days. It jumped like 37
years later, which would be. It's like 6 years from now, I think. I did the math. I forget. It'd be like 2026 or something like that, 2027.
But I mean, oh man.
But I mean, the thing I like is that he's really good at world building. Like, there's this whole world outside of these characters, and you're just, watching a snapshot of these characters' life. And even though the snapshot is like, I don't know, 50 years or something like that, it's like, it's just amazing. I love the fact that they go to his funeral, and he's like 80, like he dies, and they're like, at 50, before 50, nobody really knew anything about him, but yeah, he's a funny guy. Like he's inspired so many different people. He became like this famous doctor, and he's an adventurer, and he's a funny guy, and all this stuff. And like, you didn't see that when he was with them. Like, they just sucked the life out of them. And it's such like an interesting concept to have in a dark comedy. It's like this whole like, marriage as a way of like, almost like a parasite. Like, it's like this. It's just such an interesting movie. I love.
So since we're at that point, we're talking about the end, and you mentioned marriage. I am married, and I didn't watch the whole movie with Judy, but I watched probably the last half of it with her. She was busy working, and then kind of joined me to watch the rest of it. But as I said, she'd seen it before, and she's kind of like doing other stuff as watching it. But she kind of stopped at that sequence because the very end of that movie, when they then leave the chapel and walk down the stairs, and they're fighting with each other, and they fall and completely, essentially explode and are in pieces all over the floor. Judy and I both were, again, actually laughing out loud at that moment.
It
love
the
ending. So wonderful and hilarious, and the perfect cap for that movie, the perfect way to just end it, and it was just so hilarious.
They fully lost Bruce Willis, and now they fully lost like everything.
Yeah,
like everything literally went to pieces.
They were like,
and Bruce, and the movie has in a way its own kind of. The joke is, the twist ending is they want eternal life, but Bruce Willis found a way to achieve eternal life by investing in other people around him. So it's like the twist is the joke's on them. That they're just awful and stay awful and continue to be awful and don't get it no matter what happens, and they then literally fall apart at the steps of the church at Bruce Willis's funeral, where people are all grieving and celebrating him.
Yeah, they're like hollow inside, like mannequins, because if you look inside the book, there's like nothing. There's just gray, and like and then the paint, also the symbolism of the paint. They're always applying paint and it's chipping, and I like when she takes a veil. And it's like, just grotesque. And then,
And then, of course, we didn't talk about before that where Bruce Willis refused to take the potion because he didn't want to then be stuck with them forever.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a great point.
That was such a significant moment, because that's where the moment where he turns, because at that point it's like he's almost just as awful as them. Is he? We don't know, but almost. And that's the moment where, okay, he's the good guy in this movie.
Yeah. I like how, and even like Isabella Rossellini, she's like so surprised. She's like, wait, what? What? Like, she was so confused. And, this movie gives me warm, fuzzy feelings inside, even though it's like dark and.
Oh yeah, it's silly and dark at the same time, which kind of makes you feel happy and like, again, a comedy.
But I mean, like, for me, like, I grew up with this movie, so it's like,
of course,
weirdly a part of my childhood, so I kind of have a weird perspective on this.
You could say that it's one of the movies that made you.
It is.
Oh,
it is.
Wow.
It is a movie that made me. There you go.
And on that note, I think this is a good spot for us to end on this film before we fall apart. And but yeah, you guys, final thought for me, love this film. I can't wait to revisit it. Groundbreaking, great. What about you? And also, Josiah, where can they find you as you give your final thought?
I'll go first, Paul. You'll have your turn, buddy. For me, the final thought is just, I think I said most, even I had I always have asterisks in my notes of things that I most want to say, and I hit all of them today. So that's a good thing. And I don't always, because there's so much ground to cover. So I just watched the movie. It's really, really worth watching on multiple levels. It's just an enjoyable movie as a movie, plus all the visual effects things, and just watch it. That's really it. You can find me on YouTube and Instagram and other places, Twitter, as Josiah is Right, WRITE. So be sure to find me. And I haven't mentioned this in a couple previous episodes, I've been forgetting. Subscribe here and subscribe to my channel over there, and you will be and make sure you comment on this video or any of our Popmosis videos, and you will be entered to win a t-shirt. So be sure to do that, and you could win a free t-shirt. We are going to give away our first one from Season 1 very soon, and then we'll be giving away one for Season 2. And we're going to give away at least 3 shirts for sure. One of Josiah is Right, one of Popmosis, and one of The Gathering in general. So be sure to subscribe to both of our channels here at The Gathering and me over at Josiah is Right.
Don't miss out, or we'll come after you. and you'll break into pieces. I'm kidding. I'm not
Ooh,
threatening
oh,
anybody. I
that's
love
good.
everybody.
No, that was real. I thought
It
that was a real
was
threat.
dark.
That
It
was
was dark.
sincere
Like
threat.
this film.
Sincere.
Dark areas,
Sincere.
Tyler. Oh man.
Yeah, death became of
This
me.
movie, yeah.
So yeah, as for me, my final, I highly recommend it. I give it a juxtapazuki or whatever the fuck term I made up.
It's a
It's great.
delicious movie.
Yeah, it's a great movie. I love it. It's kind of like it's like a forgotten classic, and like they don't really make movies like this anymore. Like the good dark comedies that are well acted, and it's just like it's a relic of time. So
They didn't
treat
really
yourself.
then.
Even then, it wasn't really that profitable according to production information.
Which is so strange to me, but yeah.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's an amazing movie. I recommend it. And you can find me Instagram at Arcade Blackfire. Sorry.
Paul's like, who am I and where am I?
Who am I?
No,
Death became Paul.
I had a
Became Paul.
flashback of this movie, like I was thinking, because for some reason I don't know why I thought of this, but this movie kind of like the satire about the wealthy kind of reminded me a little bit of Knives Out, which came out like 2019. There's a similarity with that, so I was thinking of that.
Love that movie.
And then in my mind, I was thinking of Breaking Bad. When Walter White's like growth, it goes growth, decay, and then transformation. Like that's really much the arc of all three of them. There's growth, decay, and then transformation. And I love that theme, and so I was thinking about Breaking Bad and that term. So there you go. I'll shut up. Watch this fucking movie. It's great. Take us out, Tyler.
Thank you for listening in, and thank you for watching. And if you are watching on YouTube, please subscribe and like the video. If you subscribe to the channel, we have so many other podcasts and so much more planned for Popmosis. And also, like if you can find this on iTunes, Spotify, and everything as well. If you want to listen to this as well, please also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and everything else. Join our Discord. I'm on Twitch, and yeah. Music has been provided by Carlisle Laurent. Have a wonderful week. Wear a mask and GGG.
What's on the silver screen? Things you wouldn't believe. Grand Geek Gathering.